Good morning and welcome to our Meridian Corporate Council members and other guests. This is Stuart Holliday. I would just like to say that we are delighted and honored to have Dr. Rania AlMashat joining us this morning. As Egypt's Minister of International Cooperation, she brings a wealth of experience and understanding to her job, having served in the United States as well earlier in her career and working as Egypt's Minister of Tourism. So thank you for being here, Dr. Mashat. And I'd also like to thank our good friend and Meridian trustee, Ambassador Dwight Bush, who also has a wealth of experience as a former U.S. ambassador to Morocco and extensive private sector experience in the region, for leading today's discussion with Dr. Mashat. So thank you to you all, and I hope you have a productive discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Meridian International's global briefing with Her Excellency Rania AlMashat, Minister of International Cooperation of the Arab Republic of Egypt. My name is Dwight Bush. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of Meridian International, and I previously served the United States as Ambassador to the Kingdom of Morocco. I have the difficult task of moderating this discussion in the absence of our President, CEO, and leader always, Stuart Holliday, who is on travel. I will do all that I can to uphold the standards and the high bar set by Stuart. Your Excellency, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to Meridian International. I can state without equivocation that among all the things that I have done in my career, serving my country as ambassador is by far the most fulfilling experience I've had. Service to country and to its citizens is a very unique and humbling experience. As you represent your country, your history, your values, and your commitment to doing all that one can to not only further one's country's agenda, but also to do constructive things that improve the plight of all the citizens of the world. So, Excellency, I must say that I'm a bit jealous sitting here, fully aware of your outstanding and continuing public service to Egypt and to the important global organizations that you have worked with previously. Dr. AlMashat currently serves as the Minister of International Cooperation for the Arab Republic of Egypt. In this capacity, she works to strengthen economic relations between Egypt and regional and international organizations. A graduate of the University of Cairo, Dr. AlMashat subsequently earned master's and PhD degrees from the University of Maryland in economics. Among other things, Dr. AlMashat has significant experience in international policy positions, having worked as a senior economist and advisor to the International Monetary Fund and deputy governor of the Central Bank of Egypt, where she focused on monetary policy between 2005 and 2016. From 2016 through 2018, she held several positions, including being a member of the Audit Committee to the Board of Directors of the General Authority for Investment and Free Zones. In 2018, she was appointed to the very important and prominent position as Minister of Tourism for Egypt. Ambassador AlMashat was very successful in this capacity, managing a very important sector of the Egyptian economy. She successfully promoted Egypt's tourism attractions, substantially raising the number of tourists visiting Egypt and returning Egypt to its prominent role as one of the most desired tourist destinations in the whole world. And along the way, she has served in distinguished roles as visiting professor at various higher learning institutions. She is a valued speaker at various fora, including the World Economic Forum. She is also an alumni and active in different educational experiences throughout the United States. Dr. AlMashat, I welcome you. Next, we will receive some brief remarks from Mr. Yadu Yaqub, Senior Strategic Advisor at SAS, and Abed Hamadi, Middle East and African Region of SAS Head of Operations.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the introduction, Ambassador Bush. It's great to see you as always. I'd also like to thank you, Peru and Meridian, for giving us the opportunity to sponsor this great event. Look forward to hearing from Her Excellency and what she's been doing, all the great things she's doing in Egypt to increase their economic footprint. But before I go into that, we'll just give a quick introduction to SAS and what we do. We are a US data analytics company with customers in 147 countries, one of those being Egypt. And we are the world's largest privately held software company. We're the leader in artificial intelligence and advanced analytics. And we're used by over 83,000 private businesses, government agencies, and institutions, including every US government agency. And our goal is to turn data and all the data that exists in the world into actionable intelligence so that you can make more informed decisions, so that companies and groups can become more reactive. So they can become less reactive and more proactive, so they can improve policies, with the end goal throughout being to see positive change in the world. I'd just like to introduce and hand it over to my colleague, the director of our Middle East Africa practice, Mr. Abid Hamadi, who will talk about how data analytics are transforming the Middle East.
Thank you, Adu. Thank you, everyone. And it's a great pleasure to be within this forum. So from the Middle East and Africa perspective, which is the region that I'm running for SAS, we have more than 7 offices across this entire region with more than 500 consultants across all projects and engagements. And within the presence in North Africa and Egypt, and specifically, we are trying to invest more and have more capacity and more presence within the Egyptian market, which has been there for more than 30 years for SAS Middle East. We have a large office in Egypt, and we have commitment to the territory and to the development of the human capital. We have chosen to get our big pool of resources and technical team members out of Egypt. And this is giving us more and more strategic partnership is being done with local vendors and local companies. And this is giving us more than 18 to 20 customers from the banking sector and more than 20 government agents that's being using our SAS solutions and tools. So we have strategic also partnership with universities and other institutions like the ITI in Egypt, where we are having the new generation of techie and the resources who can be introduced to SAS, they get it into their curriculum, and they have it part of the value creation towards this market and to the entire Middle East and Africa. To note that in Middle East and Africa, we are the leader in digital transformation for the government sector. And this is being proven with successful ROI in Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other countries in this territory, South Africa and the others. So we are very keen in having the data and analytics being part of this initiative and part of the support for Her Excellency and for other initiatives for the territory and different sectors. Finally, we need to have leveraging the AI and all the new technologies from data and analytics and for securing new revenue for the government and to help them in also the cost optimization. Thank you again. It's a great pleasure. I'm lucky to introduce Her Excellency, Dr. AlMashat. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you today. I would like to thank Ambassador Holiday for the invitation, Ambassador Bush for the introduction, and I'm very honored to join you. Washington, D.C. is very close to my heart. I spent close to 15 or 16 years in Washington, part of them doing my master's and PhD, and the other part working at the International Monetary Fund in different capacities, once as a senior economist and then later on as an advisor to the chief economist. As Ambassador Bush, when he was reading out my resume, as he mentioned, it's really a public service. Even if you're at the IMF, which is one of the biggest financial institutions, again, it's providing a public service to governments on their banking sector, monetary policy, structural reforms, and so forth. So it's an honor joining you all, and I think my opening remarks are going to be brief, because I want to allow time for questions. I just want to say that there's a detailed presentation that was sent to all of you. The idea of the presentation and the reason why I want to mention it is because we're trying as much as possible to get the Egypt story out. It's a very telling story, and it's one most recently precisely around COVID that I hope everyone investigates in some detail. So, this is a very good moment to reflect a little bit on what the world looks like today. Today is a time when there is truly fresh thinking around how we all get together to be able to collaborate for providing even more public goods for everyone. Multilateralism, and there's currently a debate post-COVID or around COVID, has multilateralism weakened our countries on their own? And that, of course, is painted a little bit by some of the trade tensions among the big economies. And what I always try to emphasize is that the COVID crisis has shown that there is not a single country that is by itself. No country is isolated. And if we talk in economic terms, countries and economies are truly coupled. And therefore, there is a very important and urgent need to always talk within a multilateral setting. And that's why I'm very pleased to join all of you today. At the Ministry of International Cooperation, and for those who want to know what the ministry does, I always try to summarize it in one word. We do economic diplomacy. And economic diplomacy in the way that is being sort of formulated is to really create this inclusive engagement with our different stakeholders. And those stakeholders include the private sector, include civil society, and most importantly, it includes both our bilateral and multilateral development partners. Through this ministry, we are responsible for the official development assistance that goes to development projects, and that is ODA financing. And that requires a bit of focus on the goals related to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and how the different projects that the country engages in is actually linked to improving the lives of citizens, whether it's water desalination, clean and green projects related to moving to renewables, economic empowerment of women, and other very important projects that affects the livelihoods of people. In the work that we do here, economic diplomacy for us includes three principles. These principles are ones that encourage engagement. So the first one is creating multi-stakeholder platforms where we as a ministry and line ministries come together with all our development partners to basically be able to design what the best sort of formula for cooperation is going forward. So some development agencies provide technical assistance, others provide financing. And the important thing is in a development story is to ensure that there's complementarity between the different stakeholders. And of course, the engagement from the private sector and civil society is one which is very, very key because sometimes these projects are actually tailored to the private sector or tailored to civil society. The second very important point is how do we map the different financing that goes to projects to the SDGs? So there's the ODA SDG mapping exercise, which is extremely important at this juncture when all countries are looking forward to 2030 and being able to stand in front of their citizens locally or even globally on the global stage to basically say how much have we done to basically meet the 17 SDGs because they are very important to each and every citizen, and they are very, very important in the political as well as the policy-making dialogue. The third one is creating a global partnership narrative. And here I want to explain that the only or the best way to collaborate in a meaningful framework is to actually communicate. And through the global partnerships narrative, our objective is to have the story of development showcased in a way that is not just about the financing of a project, but it's actually about the impact of the project. And here we came up with a very important narrative, which is people and projects and purpose. And that is people are at the core of any project. The projects are actionable, so they can either be with the government, the private sector, or a partnership. And third, purpose is the driver. And here comes which SDGs does any project actually meet. So with our development partners, we are creating a very important content on the existing portfolio and making sure that we are also telling the story going forward. So these are just highlights of what we do here at the ministry. Maybe I want to also explain a few things on the Egyptian economy. Pre-COVID, Egypt was one of the fastest growing emerging markets. And that is because the government has invested very much in continuous reforms. We had a very successful economic reform program with the IMF between 2016 and 2019. And so we entered this crisis with very important foreign exchange buffers, as well as a decent position on the fiscal side. And this is really what helped the country withstand this very big shock, which is the pandemic, of course. And something else which is quite, when you take a look at the international forecast for growth today, we stand out despite the slowdown as one of the countries that has a positive growth rate expected during this coming year. And here comes the very important motto and belief, and I have seen this over my years of service. Reform is a continuous process, and it's very important to reform in good times so that we can mitigate impact of shocks in bad times. So when I first joined the central bank in 2005, we had a very ambitious and important banking sector reform program, and that helped us withstand the global financial crisis and helped us later on avoid banking crises and bank runs during the transformation in 2011 and 2013. During COVID, the country and the government has done a lot of work to try and also stave off some of the socioeconomic implications of the pandemic. So the health issue is one issue that was dealt with. There was early tracing, creating field hospitals, imposing partial lockdowns, not a full lockdown, being mindful of this trade-off between livelihood and lives. But on the socioeconomic side, there were an expedition of many of the structural reforms that the country wanted to do. So creating more or expanding the social safety net was extremely important and was taking place, trying to include the informal sector in the formal sector, and more than 1.5 million people got cash transfers during this period to support them. And then Egypt was the first country to have a gender-related COVID response with a policy tracker that is transparently published every month. So, and there was from the central bank side additional measures taken to push further with financial inclusion so that the queues on different banks and so forth would be limited. So there was a very mindful effort in pushing reforms that would really help in terms of the socioeconomic implications. There was, of course, fiscal and monetary policies that were implemented, and all of this is laid out in detail in the presentation. I don't want to go over all of them, but for those who don't know the measures that the government took and how it all tied together, I think that presentation provides very important insights. On the women issue, I want to mention one important item that we launched with the World Economic Forum, Closing the Gender Gap Accelerator, that was most recently. And it's a public-private platform of collaboration to basically push for more women empowerment with respect to employment, and also create a higher or more women in leadership positions in the country. Estimates show that gender parity would actually increase GDP by around 34%. So there is a national strategy, and we are working with our partners to be able to push ahead on the gender agenda. In addition, and let me talk about the green recovery, because all of us know that during COVID, there has been a lot of public spending going up, and everyone is worried about what the implications are on the environment. And in our case, there is an energy strategy for 2035, and its objective is to have 42% renewable energy component by 2035. We have currently passed a decree that 30% of all investments this year have to be compliant with climate environmental standards, which are published. So there are several measures that are taken to basically push forward with this green recovery. Also, for those who don't know, there are several projects which are taken as exemplary. For instance, with the IFC, we have the BIM-BAN project, which are solar panels in Aswan, and it is a very important example of private-public partnerships. Therefore, for those who want to follow, we also mentioned that in detail. The other important development which took place in July, we also have a standby agreement with the International Monetary Fund. And the idea here is not just the financing, but also very important to be transparent with the macroeconomic framework, and also the announcement of the different additional structural reforms that the government is implementing. So this is also published, and you can take a look at a table that shows the structural reforms that the government is going to do with respect to increasing competition, improving governance, better public finance management. So it's a host of measures that are extreme, and policies which are extremely important to push for a speedy recovery post-COVID. So that is something which is extremely also, again, in line with this idea of continuing with reforms. Maybe what I want to conclude with is that the region to us is extremely important as well. And we have a regional action group, which is part of the World Economic Forum, where ministers from different countries in the region, as well as CEOs from the private sector, come together to try and see what is the best way to actually have more inclusive economies, ones that encourage the youth, ones that depend on more of the digital or benefit from the fourth industrial revolution, one that is more climate responsive. And here I want to mention that yesterday, our 7 principles of cooperation going forward have been published, and I think that for everyone in the audience, it is also quite important to take a look at those, and they're also outlined in the presentation in detail. Just on the digital and some of the reforms that we did, and this is also quite important. When COVID hit and the pandemic hit, all of us as policymakers, as citizens, as private sector, as governments, had to be extremely agile and act quickly. There was no manual or book to look into and see how do we act and react in such a pandemic. The importance of partnerships that took place pre-COVID proved to be extremely important during this pandemic. For instance, with the World Bank, we have a very important program on education reform. And so when the pandemic hit, there was learning over the internet. And this was a massive experience and experiment for a country as big as Egypt, with the number of students in different levels. Something else, we have a very big public sector civil service. And again, we were given the flexibility to work from home. So in my ministry, for instance, since March 17, we've been working from home. And it is an experiment that we did not see before. But it showed us that reform is possible, fast action is possible, and that the depth of reforms and the discussions that you have with development partners, as well as with our bilateral strategic partners as well, all of this at the time of crises pays off. So let me just conclude by saying, multilateralism, in my view, is extremely important. It is going forward. I don't see a way of shying and not doing or not pushing for more conducive platforms. Will all of us come together? Dialogue with the private sector is extremely important. And the COVID crisis has shown that governments have supported the private sector, because we know that the engine of growth going forward is going to be through the economic activity that can be, and the employment that can be generated from the private sector. The agenda of reform is one that is continuous, and trying to equip our younger generation with the digital tools that will provide for more employment going forward is extremely at the forefront of our agenda. Again, our relationship within Africa is one that is extremely important and something that we are pushing forward to. And of course, the collaboration that I mentioned with our colleagues in the Middle East within the region. Thank you very much for inviting me, and these were my opening remarks. I would like to just again mention that more details are in the presentation, and I'm ready for any questions that the audience might have. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for that discussion. I think you've made the Maryland Terrapins all proud by your hard work and your diligence, and certainly you have a portfolio that is very robust and is very important. It's great to hear you talk about themes like the importance of renewable energy, like having equity issues resolved for women, and also that you're encouraging structural and other sorts of reforms, education reforms, et cetera, that are really important for bringing Egypt forward. You also mentioned that we're in a very complicated time. The coronavirus has had an impact that, as you said, there is no roadmap for addressing. But I think it's also disruptive because as you lay out these long-term agendas that you have, there also has to be a consideration of the immediate, the priorities that will be needed to be discussed in order to right the boat, as you will, and move things forward. How do you think about Egypt's short-term priorities, and what's the importance of the multilateral organizations that you mentioned for helping to address this pandemic broadly and to reestablish economic vitality around the world?
Well, thank you very much. I mean, on the short term, and this is what I tried to explain a little bit in my introductory remarks, maybe I wasn't clear enough, but in our, we do have a reform agenda, and we were going with a certain pace, and then the pandemic hit, so we had to push forward with many of the, for instance, registering informal sector workers. That was a huge task, and the data was not readily available. So you had to go through a very fast coordination with different government agencies, depend on some of the statistics that exist, and then do a filtering. So today we have 1.5 million informal workers on registered, which is a huge, has huge impacts in the short term. Number two, expanding the social safety net. That is also a very important reform that took place quickly. pushing financial inclusion and changing regulations quite quick in the midst of the pandemic. And this will also push forward with respect to payments and e-payments and the e-wallets and so forth. And then the gender agenda as well, to try and make sure that we have transparently formulated gender-sensitive policy framework for COVID. So these are just a few of the reforms that took place. There are other things on the fiscal side and on the central bank side, but the immediate action was to make sure that we try and mitigate the socioeconomic impact of COVID. And that's why these reforms were pushed, but also the point that there was not a full lockdown, a partial lockdown, and making sure that you are trying to, walk that very, slopey road in a way that makes sure things are going fine. And then, with respect to our multilateral institutions, of course, when you have a good standing with your partners, it's very easy to build on. So it's not that we're starting from scratch with our reforms, but we do have cooperation with the IMF. We do have cooperation with the World Bank, the African Development Bank, on our energy and infrastructure projects. There's so much happening with respect to transportation. So our development agenda is one which is extremely ambitious, but at the same time, over the past 6 years, when you take a look at the connectivity with roads, railways, different lines for the metro, when you take a look at the social housing that was increased, new cities being put in place, the energy agenda, so that we try and move from a certain electricity print to more renewable. So these are all very important objectives that we have.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now I would like to turn to the floor for some questions. First, Ambassador David Gross, a former U.S. Ambassador for ICT Policy.
Well, thank you very much. And first, let me thank Meridian and thank Ambassador Bush. We've had a lot of wonderful ambassadors to Morocco, but none better and better serve the United States than Ambassador Bush. He's only exceeded in my esteem by his wife, Tony Cook Bush, who is also quite extraordinary. And so please give her my best when you see her later today.
Will do.
All right. Minister, I've had the honor of not only being the U.S. ambassador, but also being a former trustee at Meridian. So it's a great honor to be here with you. And thank you so much for doing this. And I also want to thank you so much for the written materials that you distributed. It's really quite extensive, quite interesting, and I think really very, very helpful for all of us. My question is, Egypt for many, many years has been a leader in the area of ICTs, and perhaps the late Minister Tariq Kamal, who was extraordinarily important to many of us, both personally and has been a global leader in the area of ICTs and is much missed. But he really put Egypt on the map in regard to the internet. You mentioned about COVID in your presentation. You talk about harnessing the fourth industrial revolution. Can you talk a little bit about the role of the internet and wireless communications in Egypt and how you see that giving Egypt a comparative advantage globally in terms of the next set of economic reforms, particularly in light of COVID, where, as you point out, you and many others have been working from home. Thank you very much, Minister, for joining us, and I look forward to hearing your answer.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gross, and absolutely, Minister Tariq Kamel played a very, very important role, and that was the beginning of introducing ICT within a government framework and pushing the private sector and so forth. We had the honor of a discussion with His Excellency Secretary Ross Secretary of Commerce of the US. And there is currently a lot of cooperation between the US and Egypt in the ICT sector, and we're putting together a framework that will be a prototype for other countries in the region with respect to sharing of the information, with respect to sort of the regulatory framework today when we're talking about a very dynamic and evolving ICT sector. So what I can tell you is that Egypt has proven when it comes to the skill set of the employee, the staff and the young who are actually engaged in this sector. There are so much talent, and I know that we were considered as an outsourcing hub for many of the important companies, and that is something that we want to expand and broaden, because there are so many important American firms that we would like their presence here in the country. So from our side, on the regulatory elements, there's a push. There is currently talks and partnerships with the US Commerce Department, and they are very advanced. And I'm sure we can also have His Excellency on another talk where he can speak about those details. And what is very, very important also on a local level is that the fear of technology use on items that people were not accustomed to, like doing exams online, learning online, teaching online, all of this, these cultural barriers and parents worried about the future of their students. It's not just about that, but it's the spillover that has on firms, sort of innovating to create solutions that are digitally based. I think all of this are the positive silver linings of the COVID, that many of the barriers that were just there for the sake of fear of venturing in and risking the unknown, I think that is what we have been able, all of us, to overcome. And I think technology has been our tool, a very successful tool, and there's a realization that we need to capitalize on that going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we'll have a question from Mr. Hamandi from SAS.
Thank you. Your Excellency, as we are a global leader in the data analytics and we have large experience in digital transformation and supporting the public and government sector in various initiatives in digital transformation and others, it was very interesting to hear from you on your ministry and the overall cabinet, what is happening in Egypt and the transformation that you're having. And additionally, for the ICT part, we're offering our solutions, services, and technology and consulting background to support you on this. I would like to ask you here, what are strategic or special projects that you're working on where SAS can add value and we can cooperate together with other vendors or other partners, and we can join forces to help you support your path in this transformation?
I think that the digital potential of Egypt is not fully tapped. We are 100 million as a population, and more than 60% are young. So their dependence and their enthusiasm and appetite to the digital world is there. I think that partnerships with other companies within the country is one venue, and also, of course, through technology cuts across different sectors. If we're talking about today getting on public transportation, ticketing, and there's so much going on, and I think that the services and the expertise that SAS can provide, and as you mentioned, you're a partner with us here over several years. So I think that there is definitely, as we are all thinking about whatever the new normal is, I believe that technology cross-cuts, it's not by itself, it cross-cuts across, for example, on agriculture. Agriculture today and how every country is looking at its food security so that, you know, if a pandemic happens again, or if there's a disruption because of you know, the trade flows that we saw over the past few months being interrupted, how can you really be self-sufficient? So also digital solutions with farmers, access to information, how you do the logistics very quickly to make sure that there are not food interruptions. So agriculture is one very important also sector that can benefit from this. And the other sector, which is definitely with respect to technology that can be better, but we can talk about this in more detail later. Irrigation, how do you find irrigation solutions, which again, through technology can be quite useful.
Our pleasure, of course.
Next, we have
Thank
a
you.
question from Leila Afas, Director, International Public Policy at Toyota.
Great, thank you, Ambassador Bush, and it's such a pleasure to see you, Ambassador AlMashat. Thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. Toyota has been in Egypt for over 40 years, you know, and we're very proud of our relationship in country. And as you know, in 2017, we announced a 5-year investment to expand that presence. So I'd love to learn from you how the private sector can play a more integrated role in Egypt's sort of economic development plans. And also in the context of technological development, we heard from Ambassador Gross about broadband and ICT, but also looking at things, you know, like autonomous vehicles and things like that, recognizing sort of the worker displacement issue, which is something that we face here when we talk about the future of mobility, not just overseas.
Well, thank you so much for your question. And you know, I'm a loyal customer of Toyota, so I've owned like 3 Toyota cars over since I was grad student. So, but absolutely, I mean, the automotive industry is one which is very important. And in Egypt, we've had different assembly lines for different auto brands. But as you mentioned, the artificial intelligence aspect, when you talk about autonomous vehicles, also when we're talking about the move because of the carbon print to electric buses and electric cars. So all of these again are very important venues where the private sector can get engaged in Egypt, because as I mentioned, they are just beginning here, and it's a huge market. And therefore, from our side as government, and you mentioned the importance of the private sector, the engine of growth we know is the private sector. And if I'm taking the transportation sector in Egypt, there has been so much deregulation. Today, for the first time, private sector can actually operate public services. This was not the case a few years ago. So I think that there's plenty of opportunity in terms of you know, the move in the directions that you have mentioned. And I think that my colleagues in the ministries of trade and industry are actually, you know, there will be ways to reach out, because of course the COVID, you know, the past few months, everybody has been very much focused on the health and the implications that come out of that. So we were more of a crisis management. I think that's the case for corporates, that's the case for governments. And now, as we're getting more used to this is life as it is, I think there are going to be plenty of venues to cooperate going forward. So I will definitely pass on that question as well to my colleague in cabinet, and maybe reach out on more articulated venues of cooperation on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leila, for your question. I believe that next we have a question from Victor Shibley, the publisher of the Washington Diplomat magazine.
Hello, how are you? Pleasure, Dr. AlMashat. Pleasure, Ambassador Bush and Meridian. Thank you for putting this together. We have a newspaper, the Washington Diplomat, that reaches Capitol Hill, White House, State Department, and all the embassies in Washington, D.C. A bit of a timely question. Egypt has been pioneers in peace with Israel. Today in Washington, UAE and Israel signing a peace treaty. And I just want to know, what does Egypt think of this, and how is it going to help locally, economically? Is there power in numbers, having more Arab nations? It seems like we might have double the amount of Arab nations that have peace with Israel. How's this going to turn out for Egypt?
Thank you very much. I forgot to mention something when Laila was talking. She addressed me as ambassador, which is an honor, of course, but you know, I'm an ambassador through my job as a minister. With respect to peace, I think that Egypt, you know, took that step 40 years ago, and I think that we would not have been where we are today with other countries if it weren't for the very bold actions that Egypt took many decades ago. It's been a leader both at war and at peace. You know, people today talk about warm peace versus cold peace. And I believe that if it weren't for very important actions that Egypt took many years ago, we would not have been here today. And again, I mean, globally, you know, different companies today reach everywhere. And that's because it's really a global world. And the importance of technology, the importance of movement and so forth just means that collaboration is very important.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Peru, I think we have some time to open the mic to some other interested voices.
Correct. If you have a question for the minister, please use the raise hand feature and we will call on you. But Ambassador Bush, while people are collecting their thoughts, maybe you have another question for the minister as well.
Yes, I do have a question, and I think it pertains to the priorities that you have in your specific portfolio for the coming year. Again, I know we've got the overlay of the coronavirus, but I have to assume that there are certain things that you believe that you need to address in your specific portfolio over the course of the coming year.
Thank you, Ambassador. You know, as I mentioned, the different sectors have development agendas, and this is in line with Vision 2030. So there is a strategy for energy, there is a strategy for water, there is a strategy for education, and our role is to mobilize the required ODA financing or the development financing, as well as the technical engagement with our development partners. You know, priority sectors today, as I mentioned, agriculture, irrigation, women empowerment, entrepreneurship, and the digital solutions that were that the crisis has highlighted very forcefully. And the idea is knowing that global financing is quite, I don't want to say scarce, but because everybody is in need of mobilizing resources, countries have to be extremely targeted and extremely transparent with what they are going to do. And that's what we are trying to push forward through our work and through our engagement with our different development partners. The other thing is that, you know, trying to push further the development story that has happened in Egypt to the international stage. So through the PMPMP global partnerships narrative that is in the presentation in detail, I think that we want everybody to know more about these projects, because they're not a dollar value. They really are human, impactful story, and they don't only speak about what the government is doing, but they also show how partnerships result at the end into actual impact. And here, let me just mention two USAID projects in Egypt, since you're in Washington. USAID has a fantastic project that it's done collectively with the Egyptian government, and it's STEM schools for girls that come from Upper Egypt. They leave their families at a young age, and come to Cairo in a boarding school, and they learn the science and technology. So this shows the power of partnership. When it's well designed, it has impact, and it's very contemporary with the ongoing evolution that we see. Also, USAID has another fantastic project, and that is logistics training and certificates that are provided to youth in the Suez area, so that they are equipped with skills and they find a job immediately. So again, these are stories which are untold on the Hill. I was at Congress in February, and I want to use these stories so that the taxpayers know how their money is being used. And at the same time, the important impact on the Egyptian people is also told, because that required strategic thinking from the government. It required a proper design between the two strategic partners as well. So all of these are extremely important stories to tell. So economic diplomacy is what I'll be focusing on for sure over the next year.
You know that the middle school program for girls that you mentioned is very important. When I was in Morocco, we had AID support, and we also had private market support for some of those girls, because, as you know, many of them have to make decisions about that stage of their lives, and often they do not pursue higher education. But what we found in our programs was that the girls who made it through those middle school situations in STEM became some of the stronger performers in high school and in college in the country. And so making sure that access is there for that transitional period leads to a great deal of success for these young ladies.
No, absolutely. And as we're talking about more women joining the labor force, because it's macro critical and it has impact on economic growth and productivity, you want to equip them with proper skills. And I think the STEM skills, science, technology, math, are all really what is needed today. So, I mean, I always take this USAID project as a very important sign of what collaboration and partnership can provide.
Thank you. Peru, do we have a couple of questions from the floor?
We do. We have a few minutes left here. And Minister, I just also wanted to make you aware of the fact that Meridian is a partner with the U.S. Department of State and the White House on the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative, the WGDP. And in fact, we bring a cohort of these women entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, to the United States every year. They just wrapped up their program, actually, I believe today. And so would love to get you plugged in, and happy to share some more information with Rula and your team about that as well. I think you'd be a very inspirational figure to speak to these young women as well. We have a quick comment from Lauren Griffith, so I'm just going to allow her here to switch her mic on. Lauren, you're on. Please go ahead.
Maybe
I think you may be. Oh, great. Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, Minister AlMashat. This is Hisham Fahmy. How are you? Good to have you here, or listen to you from here in Washington. I just want to ask you a couple of questions. How do you see the role of prestigious think tanks like the Meridian and the business sector, corporate America, in the relationship, U.S.-Egypt relationship? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hisham, for that question. And the private sector has a huge role. It's not just in terms of investments. I had welcomed Brandon Bechtel in my office sometime in fact. This was just before Corona hit. And American firms play a very important role, not just in terms of their investment, but in terms of their knowledge transfer and in terms of their training of locals. And this is where sustainable partnerships continue. And I think that positive stories need to be presented more. And that's where the think tanks come in. And my objective through the global partnerships narrative is not just a narrative with the international institutions, but also the private sector. So this PMPMP is so important for disseminating the value, and it's not just a monetary value, it's an intrinsic value. It's a value of peace, relationship building, different generations opening up to know the cross-country experiences. And that is how you actually create leaders that understand diversity and are able to engage and are able to actually have conducive dialogues in a multilateral setting. So I believe that think tanks have a huge role, a role in showing the positive and the important impact of partnerships, whether they're government to government or private sector within certain countries. And I hope that we can leverage some of the very important stories that the US private sector has in our country. And it's across it's in energy, it's in airspace, it's in military equipment, it's in beverages, and it's across the board. It is very important both economically for our country as well as for the private sector in the US.
Thank you. I know we're almost out of time here, so I just wanted to thank you, Minister, for spending some time with us. I know this was supremely beneficial for all of our constituents. And thank you to SAS for hosting today, and of course, Ambassador Bush for moderating. I just wanted to open the floor for your quick closing remarks, and Ambassador Bush, and if Abid and Yada want to say something as well. So please, after you. Minister first, and then maybe we can end with Ambassador Bush.
Well, thank you very much. I was very excited to join you when I got the invitation, and I was very happy that the Meridian was following my work, because I know that the letter that I received had economic diplomacy there. And when Hisham was asking about the role of think tanks, it's really to try and see what is going on in different countries and can have some value in terms of communication. So I look forward to coming and seeing all of you in DC and welcoming you all here in Egypt. I think that disseminating information through our presentations and such dialogue is important. And we can think of further ways of developing, our collaboration. Thank you, Ambassador Bush, for your remarks and for your questions, and thank you to all the audience for plugging in. Thank you very much.
Minister AlMashat, thank you so much for taking your time to share with us so many important things. Your portfolio is big and unique. Your skills are very much necessary. Again, as I started, and I really meant it, those who decide to do public service, civil service for extended careers need to be highly valued, because the things that you do every day not only affect Egypt and its people, but also the world. We very much appreciate what you do, and we're certain that we will be hearing more from you in the future. For the audience, I want to say that I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. This is one of the most important things that Meridian does, which is to make sure that interested audiences have access to great leaders like the minister. And I also want to just end by saying this is a difficult time.
I think we may have lost Ambassador Bush. But, there he is. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.